Let's get into the ABCs of ESOPs. All the key terms you need to know to truly understand all the concepts that we're going to get through in this course. So let's kick off with the easiest. Stock, shares. They mean the same thing and they're used interchangeably. This is a fractional ownership of a company. A share is literally a share of a company. It confers certain ownership rights as well. Options. They're different to shares. This is the option to purchase stock. You don't actually own the shares until the options convert into shares. Options are a right, but not the obligation, meaning a requirement to purchase stock at a specified price, known as the exercise price, for a specified period of time or when the options expire, which is typically about 10 years. You exercise your options if the value of your shares is higher than the option price. Share price. To use an analogy, in public markets, this is what you can buy Google for. You just go to your broker account, you press buy, and the markets determine the price already. In private markets, this is not so clear as it's an illiquid asset. No one has made a market for it. This is typically the price you were invested at. In the US, with all the taxes and rules they have Section 409A valuations, where an advisor charges you money on an annual basis to set the fair market valuation for the company. So the share price is what your investors or an advisor thinks the shares are worth until someone buys you and sets a real price per share. Before an exit, the share price in a startup is imaginary. Exercise price. This is something important to your employees. Also known as a strike price, this is the price you get when you are granted your options as an employee. The price is the fair market value or your last valuation, depending on how it works in your country. This is an important part of determining how much staff makes. We'll talk about the spread in a minute. Exercise. This is what happens when you exit. You exercise your shares, pay the strike price to convert the options into shares at your company, and at this point, there's a tax consequence. You need to talk to a tax advisor to understand the rules in your country. Exercise date. This is the date your staff can exercise their options. It's when you exercise. Surprise, surprise. Your staff can't sell your shares unless there is an acquisition or an IPO in most cases. When companies get big, they sometimes allow shares to be sold on secondary markets, though. The spread. This is the difference between the exercise price and the share price. If the exercise price is $10 and the share price is $50, then the spread is $40. The share price is going to be bigger than the exercise price if your staff are going to make any money. So assuming the share price is larger, you take the spread, times it by the number of options your staff have got, and that equals the profit they're going to get. So they've got 1,000 shares and a $40 spread, that means it's $40,000. Whoopee. Vesting schedule. This means you get shares over time and not all at once. Most companies vest their shares over a period of 4 years. There can be some variances. AngelList, a company you may have heard of, set their vesting schedule at 7 years, which is not very common. To compensate for longer vesting schedules, the staff get large issuances though. You can vest monthly or quarterly. I prefer monthly. I think it just makes more sense. You might have quarterly if you insist on your staff hanging around till the end of a quarter to get that vesting schedule part, but if they want to leave, you want them to leave, so just let them. You could also benefit a little at exit if you exit while staff are still vesting on that quarter, but that's not really a great way to think, frankly. The cliff. A vesting cliff means that there is a period of time of no vesting, but when the specified time, the cliff, is hit, the benefit becomes fully vested. For example, in a 48-month vesting schedule with a 12-month cliff, no vesting occurs for the first 12 months, but at the 12-month point, the shareholder receives full credit for those 12 months of vesting. In effect, the staff has now vested 25% of all the shares that were issued. After the cliff is met, vesting continues thereafter on a monthly or quarterly basis, whatever you chose. A cliff is often used with new employees. It effectively acts like a probationary period, during which the new employee has to prove himself to the employer. Maturity. You have to define how long the exercise window is. Staff need to exercise within a defined period of time, which is typically 7 to 10 years. If the options are not exercised, they just disappear. Importantly, they also expire when staff quit working for the startup, which is typically 90 days after termination of service. So it can effectively be worth nothing if they cannot be exercised before they leave. This is the cause of a lot of contention, since staff often don't have the money to pay the exercise value and taxes applicable unless they made a lot of money before. So typically maybe only your richest employees or the top level management would be able to do so. Accelerated vesting. Some founders and key executives negotiate into their equity arrangements that they will be entitled to some form of acceleration of the vesting on the equity upon the occurrence of a triggering event, which is typically the acquisition. Simply put, you might get to vest fully before the vesting schedule says so. This is not the norm though, even for founders and key executives, and it's almost unheard of for rank and file startup employees. With stock options, however, it is not standard to put in these kinds of acceleration for vesting provisions. Typically, only your top executives will receive vesting acceleration provisions in certain circumstances. There are two types of acceleration, single and double trigger, which simply means either one or two things need to happen to get accelerated vesting. Single trigger. This is the best one for you as a founder. Acceleration triggered solely by the sale of your company is called single trigger acceleration and results in some or all of the vesting restrictions lapsing with connection of the sale. This is designed to reward the employee for their contribution to a successful outcome of the company. Double trigger. Double trigger acceleration, as the name implies, requires two events to trigger the acceleration. Most typically the sale of the company and the involuntary termination of the employee, meaning you get fired. This is usually within 9 to 18 months after closing, and in some cases, including a short pre-closing window to counter any preemptive termination by the company to avoid a payout. Typically, the termination means termination by the company without cause, but can also include resignation by the employee for good reason. For example, a cut in pay, mandated relocation to the middle of absolutely nowhere, or a significant downgrade of duties. This is sort of like the Silicon Valley TV series when Nelson Bighetti gets sent to the roof. Double trigger acceleration has become very popular with early stage companies and aims to align the interests of the employees, the investors, and the potential acquirer with three things: providing a safety net for key employees, some of whom may be removed in the consolidation during the post-closing integration. CFOs are particularly susceptible to this. 2. Reducing dilution from automatic acceleration. And 3. Easing the complaints of the acquirer by preserving the requirement of ongoing service to the company in order to vest, meaning you need to keep working to get the value of your shares. Some investors may not like this, as the acquirer may then need to make a new incentive package for management, and that could come out of the acquisition price, meaning their pie gets smaller. Investors don't really care about management getting upside unless they are still in the deal and want to see that upside too. Acquirers may also be concerned about the prospect of handing you and your merry gang life-changing amounts of Tesla money to these executives and then trying to formulate retention packages that are sufficient to actually get them to remain in their jobs. Though the sometimes difficult period of post-acquisition integration. That's basically a time when employees have new bosses they probably don't like and uncomfortable levels of big corporate bureaucracy, meaning big company BS. Expanding the pool. If you survive long enough, good for you, and issue shares to staff left, right, and center, you're eventually going to run out of shares, right? So at seed, you had a 20% pool, you made a lot of hires, and now you're at Series A, and you need to make some big hires. You're going to need to make it larger to make those hires. This is called expanding the pool. Basically means topping up your ESOP, and it's going to happen at each fundraise. Now, final point, rules. These are all important, but less important things for you to know. For example, you can't transfer them to people, use the shares as a loan, etc. We'll discuss these at the end of the course so you have an idea what they might be, but we've covered what's important. Cool. So now those are all the key terms you need to know. Let's get on with the rest of the course.